Are you tired of the marketing guessing game? Does your website feel more like a digital billboard than a client magnet? If you're nodding along, you're not alone. And it's time to stop the uncertainty and start getting real results. Let's talk about your marketing spend. Are you just shelling out money every month and crossing your fingers? Do you ever wonder what impact your marketing is really having on your revenue? Well, it's time to take the guesswork out of the equation with Rise Up Media. We've been working with them for over a year, and the feedback from our fellow members has been fantastic. Rise Up Media is here to take your marketing to the next level. They'll even perform a full audit of your online presence, giving you the good, the bad, and even let you in on what your competition is up to that you're missing out on. And the best part, there's no obligation, no catch, no pressure. If you decide to work with them, their contracts are month to month. That's right. No long-term commitments tying you down. So what are you waiting for? To learn more about how Rise Up Media can transform your firms, visit riseupmedia.com/maxlaw, and Rise is spelled with a Z. riseupmedia.com/maxlaw.
This is Maximum Lawyer with your host, Tyson Mutrix.
Gary, so you've lived the worst case scenario for lawyers with your firm collapsing twice.
Yes.
Can you take us back to what happened and how that shaped your view of what was broken in law firm business models?
Oh, that's a great question. So coming out of law school, I knew I went to Stanford at a time when you could get 50 offers. And I didn't want to work for one of the big firms, so I picked a small firm in San Diego, really great lawyers, really nice people. And I didn't have a clue what the economics of that firm looked like. And so I was just learning how to practice law and learning what I wanted to do. But after a while, you'd see people going off into the back room and having these sidebar conversations, and the partners not necessarily getting along. And before I know it, the firm had broken into several pieces. I was fortunate to land at a good firm after that. But, it's like, I guess what I learned there is that quality lawyering does not necessarily equal quality economic performance or business performance. So I practiced in another firm in San Diego, one of the largest ones there for a while. My wife and I decided we wanted to move somewhere else to raise our family, so I moved to Boise, and I landed in the branch office of a 300-lawyer regional firm. And again, great lawyers, really nice people, but there was some really weird stuff going on there. It was like nobody made any money in this giant, prestigious firm. And so after a while, there were really strange things, like I had my review from my first year there was done by somebody from Seattle who I'd never met. And he was kind of making stuff up from notes that people had made that made no sense at all. So it was just, having a bad fit there. And then one day, I'm at home on a Saturday afternoon, and the managing partner of the local office calls me up and says, the office is closing on Monday. And, so I'm sitting there. I had a 6-month-old baby at the time and no job. Now, once again, I was fortunate. But, let's stop with that firm and talk about what I learned from that. Again, it's prestige doesn't matter. But overhead matters a lot. And this firm, this office was carrying the overhead the same as in Boise, Idaho, the same as the office in Seattle. And so, with that kind of overhead load, people couldn't make any money. And so the local partners were happy, the Seattle partners were unhappy. And that broke into several pieces. And I went with a number of lawyers to my long-term firm called Gibbons Pursley. And, I had gotten an offer there when I went to Boise and fell for and made the wrong decision. But they took me back, fortunately, and I went there, and suddenly everything changed. So I think I answered your question about the first two firms.
Well, okay, so Why do you think that they weren't making money? It's an interesting thing because you probably could see money coming in, but why do you think that they weren't actually making money?
There was not a lot of transparency for an associate lawyer at that point, so I don't know exactly. I know that there were a number of lawyers who weren't that busy, and so they were, the top line was not very strong for them. I know that was not true of me. I'd always worked hard. I was an environmental practice at that time that was going well. And, I think a lot of it was just overhead plus utilization was a big problem there, not just because people didn't have enough billable work, but like you had a meeting like every day that was not billable. So a large, time overhead load as well as the money overhead load. And it was just not the culture of that firm somehow. I mean, I think the highest paid partner in the whole firm made about $300,000 in Seattle at that in the early 90s. So it wasn't nothing. But the young partners were making $80,000, which was barely more than I was making as an associate. So it's like, why go to the trouble to be a partner at this firm? And, working really hard to make $80,000. So I knew my top line was, 400,000 revenue. And I was like, I get 80 out of that, and I'm taking risk as a partner. And, the culture was strange, like I said, very top down. I actually had some technology ideas that they squashed, literally. I got an email by mistake that said they wanted to squash it.
So it's interesting. I worked at a firm early on that was not open to ideas. It was all the ideas at the top were the ideas, and no one else's ideas kind of mattered. So what kind of atmosphere do you think that created for morale for the team? Because that doesn't seem like it's very healthy morale.
Well, I don't know that much about Seattle. And it was as a firm that had recently, where two larger firms had recently merged, one in Portland, one in Seattle. So that culture was just emerging. I think the Portland culture was probably better. I mean, in Seattle, the Seattle part of the firm was just very old school, and they worked for one of the largest banks in the country, was their major client, and so they had kind of a comfortable client relationship that I think stopped very much of any entrepreneurial feeling about it. And they managed like it was a bank. So it was just very staid, it was very traditional. And yeah, entrepreneurship just had no place there at all. And they could survive that because of who their clients were and the reputation of some of the lawyers.
Well, after all that, luckily, you didn't just survive. You were able to survive, but you helped build a multi-million-dollar practice. And so what changed for you when you finally landed at a place that understood the business side of the law?
Yeah, that was remarkable. It was one of the most remarkable moments of my career. And all of us, there were 4 or 5 of us who went to that firm at the time. We all noticed it the minute we walked in the door. And it was, the first thing was, you didn't have a non-billable meeting every day. It was just gone, right? So it's like, all of that, and none of the sort of top-down requirements and all of that, because you were treated as an entrepreneur in that firm. And that was true of us coming in as lateral partners and associates, but also true of every first-year associate coming into the firm. You come into the firm, it's like, you're responsible to feed yourself and, make your practice work. If you're brand new, your clients are all of the lawyers and other lawyers in the firm. Go get to know them and see what they need and see how you can help them. And, you get some mentorship on the way, not like, massive training programs like you get in a big firm, but, like you're going to be in court your first month on the job. So you get real experience, which I thought was, very good. So, there was that. The compensation system was very refreshing. Having come from, you get a salary. There wasn't even a bonus component in the firm I was with before. But two, you have a compensation formula. And it was slightly different between associates and partners because associates didn't take risk. You were paid based on billings, and partners were paid based on collections. But you had a formula with several components: origination, of course, and work, the amount you worked, which was you were primarily paid for doing work for clients. You had some compensation for origination. You had some compensation. There was an equity component for partners that you would buy into points in an equity pool, but it was predictable how that pool was created and, had a very good track record of producing profit for the partners. And, so what I noticed about that was as a partner, you would get a spreadsheet every month that had your origination, your working attorney collections, and then you had an overhead, which was right there. And then you saw what they had, their income and what they had available for draw. And, you think, oh, now I get to go see what so-and-so is making and spend a lot of time doing that. It had exactly the opposite effect. It's like, okay, now I'm comfortable that, this senior partner's paid on the same basis that I am. So now I can just pay attention to me. I don't have to worry about what everybody else is doing in the firm because that's self-regulating. And, people get paid more or less. And it never comes out of my pocket if somebody is a poor performer. And they get more on a formula we've all agreed to if they work harder. So it seemed very fair, and again, just took that load off my shoulders. The other thing that I loved about that was that the overhead was right there in front of your nose every month.
Interesting.
So it made everybody into an overhead hawk. So, you couldn't. There's a tendency in law firms to kind of sneak in. Oh, well, I need half another assistant because, my practice is so amazing. Or, I need somebody who can take care of my dry cleaning. And this just made that go away because it's like, wait a minute, we just had a bump in the overhead. How did that happen? I mean, mostly that went away. There might have been a little bit of that. But mostly people were going, how do we produce more for less? Because that shows up very directly in my bottom line.
I love that. That's really interesting. Okay. We're going to transition now because I want to make sure we talk about lien law.
Sure.
So you went from law practice to then legal tech founder, which to me seems like a pretty big change. Although it does sound like you had interest in tech, which makes complete sense, but it's still a massive transition. So what was the moment or the realization that sparked the idea for lien law?
Oh, that's really interesting. I listened to one of your podcasts getting ready for this, and you're going, why is it that we just can't have an all-in-one software that does everything?
You heard that episode. I'm so frustrated by it. It frustrates the hell out of me.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I started. And even in the early 90s, you probably don't even know what this is, but there was a tool called Lotus Agenda, which was sort of an early practice management type of thing that allowed you to do various things. I mean, I used it made a macro to calendar court deadlines with it. And it started back in those days. I mean, I'd taken a computer programming class or two in college, but was pretty bad at it.
Real quick though, so will you explain to people what macros mean? Because I don't think a lot of people know what a macro is.
That is a good point. It's a good point. A macro is kind of a mini computer program within another program. So you write a little bit of specialized instructions so it will do something that it wouldn't otherwise do. Like Excel has lots of macros in it if you know how to use them. So this was just a version of that. So,
That's one of maybe the best explanations I've ever heard of a macro. So a lot of people, my first firm, they used some macros in some Word documents, and if it was kind of interesting because if the macros didn't work right, your documents were all jacked up. So it's, but anyways, continue on. I did, but I do think it's one of those things where I think it's important. You definitely had some technical expertise. I don't know where you picked that up. But yeah.
A bit. I mean, yeah, it's like I understand this stuff conceptually, but I am not quite detail oriented enough to build something that works very well. I mean, AI would be a great help to me if as a coder. So, but fortunately, I have other people to do that now. So all along, I can see this potential for software to make law firms more efficient. And all along, I was struck by how crazy inefficient these law firms were. Even the good one I was at in San Diego, they were kind of transparent, and they showed me my top line and my overhead. And I looked at the overhead number and I went, what? It was like 250 grand in 1990. And so I went to my partner and said, hey, we could reduce that overhead a whole lot. And he goes, it's too much trouble, too hard to save costs. Just focus on the top line. So I'm kind of struggling with all of this. And then you start to see practice management software come out. It's like, finally, this one thing that will do everything. And, we used various versions of it in the firms I worked in. None of them ever worked the way you wanted it to. There is a certain software that will remain nameless that is still a dirty word in my firm. So, so I just kept waiting and going, this is not that hard. In the early 2000s, I kind of made up like a whole requirements list for what I needed an all-in-one software to do. Every function, and I had this vision in my mind, which is actually getting more realistic. The code name was Gladys because it was that perfect assistant who would do everything for you. So you talk about, I heard you talk in your other webinar about or your guest talked about the degradation of the interface layer. And it's like, okay, well, let's just have an assistant that you talk to and say, Gladys, draft me a pleading. And, it would have had been pretty hinky in those days. But, I went along that for a long time, and the tech wasn't ready. You didn't really have cloud yet, and I couldn't find the people I needed in Boise, Idaho at that time. And so I abandoned this idea of creating a good all-in-one software in like 2008, 2009. And then a few years later, stuff just started to happen. I had a friend who ran the executive MBA program at Boise State, and he started introducing me to people, and doors started opening. And by about 2014, 2015, we were ready to start a software company. That's where Lean Law started. Again, we probably started with the idea we would build a better Clio. But as we got into it, it was like, well, that's too complicated, and so we needed to focus, and the logical place to focus was on the financial side of the firm, and particularly because you have a good SMB foundational program like QuickBooks Online that we could build on top of, because we weren't going to build a better accounting software than QuickBooks. And so we created what we think is the best QuickBooks integration and sort of made it work for law firms.
So I want to pull up my phone because you mentioned Gladys, and I gotta say I'm a little mad that you did not build that all-in-one system. I'm a little mad, but I'm gonna let that go for now. But you mentioned Gladys, right? And the reason why I want to pull up my phone is because I want to just play around with ChatGPT. Where we've gone from 2022 to 2025 is amazing. Okay, I don't know if you played around with ChatGPT when it comes to their voice assistant at the beginning versus now. For those of you that have not heard it lately, and we're going to use your scenario where you mentioned creating drafting a pleading. Okay, so just bear with me for a second, okay? All right, so I need some help drafting an entry of appearance for a case in St. Louis County. Can you help me out with this?
Of course. course. An entry of appearance is pretty straightforward. Usually you'll just need to include the name of the attorney entering their appearance, the party they're representing, the case caption, and the case number. If you want, you can let me know any specific details and I can help you draft it out.
Yeah, so you already have my information because you know a lot about me. So you can go ahead and include my information in the signature line. The case number is 123 ABC.
Got it. I'll put something together for you. It'll look something like this. In the Circuit Court of St. Louis County, Missouri, case number 123 ABC, plaintiff, defendant, entry of appearance. Comes now Tyson Muttrix of Muttrix Firm Injury Lawyers, and hereby enters his appearance as counsel for the plaintiff or defendant in the above captioned matter. Respectfully submitted, Tyson Muttrix, Muttrix Firm Lawyers, 222 Central Ave, Steep 550, Clayton, Mo. 63105, Bone 314-20273. You can fill in the plaintiff and defendant names and let me know if you need any changes.
Thanks, appreciate it. So Gladys has gotten pretty darn good over the last few years.
I love that there was an in there.
So that's the part that I wanted to bring in, right? Because it is mind-boggling. I showed it to my kids, or let my kids listen to it, and they're like, they thought I was talking to a real person because it was so good. Now, it was a different voice. The voice we just listened to me, seems more like an AI. The male voice that I had on it before, we just changed because we were playing around in the car over the weekend with it. But the male voice that we had on there, I can't remember the names. They have really interesting names, but his voice sounds way more natural. It's real, and it's getting kind of creepy. But you mentioned that, and I thought that would be kind of fun. But so I want to get back to lien law though, because it's interesting that at this point you've already helped firms process over $1 billion in legal fees
Every year. Yeah, in the last 12 months. Yeah,
that's what I saw in the last 12 months. $1 billion. So, what is it you'd say that is like it's the core operational problem that you're helping small or mid-sized firms solve?
well, we're the financial operating system for the law firm. So with QuickBooks in the background, we integrate with QuickBooks so you can do your timekeeping, invoicing, collections, trust accounting, and reporting all in a very automated way. And we play well with others. That's part of our best-in-class philosophy is, we take advantage of the best that other programs do. So we have a few really great integrations like our QuickBooks integration that allow you to put together a best-in-class technology stack that, we hope one day functions like that all-in-one that you're talking about, but it just happens to be the pieces are made by different companies.
Gotcha. So you, on the horizon, you've got a bigger, grander plan. Is that fair to say?
Oh my gosh. I just looked at our AI plan the other day, and it's like, you can't just be scattershot with AI, but if you pick the right types of things to work on, it's amazing what we're going to be able to do. So we think we can create a very seamless experience for the user, which will have its Gladys-like elements, talking to the agents like you did, and it will also help the software talk to the software better, and pull more things out than you can now. You don't have to write macros for everything. The AI can pull those reports together. Reporting is one of the big frustrations a lot of law firms have, because never quite right. And for 11 law firms, there are 12 ways that they want to do everything. So you can't really hardwire that into the code. You have to have something like an AI to say, I want a report that's going to do this, 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 and this. And it will be able to connect the dots among all the data. If you have a great data set, as your guest the other day pointed out. It's like it changes the focus of your company to, you must have great integrations and APIs and great data. And if you've got those, you can put together something that's really powerful from the user standpoint.
I wonder if from that conversation, if there's anything that you disagreed with what we talked about, because I always like to I like to hear where I'm wrong sometimes. So do you think with any of the and we were a lot of the stuff we were talking about was theoretical, but I will Dan Nerbush, he and I think that's the one you're talking about the episode, but he and I we kind of got deep on some things. We're kind of getting theory, and I just like those kind of conversations. I like to talk about sort of where I think the law is headed in the next few years and all that. But I do wonder if there's anything from that conversation where like, these guys got this wrong. That's just not right. They're just off base. I'm just curious.
It's I'm approaching these next few years with a lot of humility because we're gonna get a lot of surprises. Some will be good and some will not, probably not. So no, I think it's all a healthy conversation at this point, and I like it. I felt like it was a fairly realistic conversation, which is you're not hearing a lot in the legal world. You're hearing it's the end of the world, it's a panacea, but trying to really get into it and help law firms figure out how do we keep up with this thing without doing stupid and expensive things and appearing in court as a cat lawyer and sending in falsified pleadings and do something productive with it.
So I saw just last week, a circuit court judge had actually ruled on a case with fake cases, and I think we all knew it was going to happen at some point. But the thing that I think is kind of interesting is that it makes me wonder, if you go back to like the 70s and 80s, how many cases were fake cases back then? Because it was very hard. Think about what it took to verify whether or not a case was actually a real case back then. You had to go to a library, grab a book, and actually find it in a book. So to me, it was far easier back then to make up a case than it is these days. You can know in a minute whether or not it's or probably less than that. You can copy and paste it into. We got to the point where every single pleading, we are going through and double checking every single freaking case as you should. But after it's a final document, we're going through again and saying, because I'm terrified of it. I am absolutely terrified of us actually using a case, because I don't, newsflash, I don't draft the majority of our pleadings. They're drafted by someone else. I then go through and review it, make my edits to it. And so I want to make sure that something has not been put in there that shouldn't be. So with that, I'm going to do a rough transition with this, where is there anything like that when it comes to building out the tech that you have to keep an eye on? Like, we have to keep an eye on the case law to make sure that we're not getting fabricated cases in our pleadings. Is there anything like that when it comes to the tech world that you're working on that concerns you to the point where you all have like checklist items to make sure that you're safe?
Oh, I think we need every aspect of the company needs processes related to that. I mean, there is no place where AI is the end all and be all. I mean, particularly, it is helping us to write code. It has doubled our productivity writing code in the last 3 months. I mean, it's crazy. But it writes bad code. So, the job switches for the people who are reviewing the code to, make sure that it is properly done. You become an editor more than a drafter. And you also have to be an architect, because it's not necessarily good at the architecture of the code and how all of that works. So there's clearly in that part of the world. One of the things I really worry about with AI, question I ask myself a lot is it making me smarter or dumber? And that's particularly true in my part of, I do content and, marketing, where you have to be just so tuned into your customer. And it's really easy to turn out garbage in AI. And stuff that's not very creative. So it puts a lot of pressure on you in that part of the world to say, because it's like, okay, you have one good idea. Now AI can help you put that idea, to make that idea into something real. Like, now this is going to sound silly, but I made some cartoons about legal administrators and managing partners. And it's like, am I capable of drawing those myself? Probably not. But I had AI draw some, and it's like, they weren't bad, but, I now have to take that and go, because nobody's going to, just have to have that framed by their desk. It's like, but if we can get it to a little higher level, then it's valuable. And how do you take that content and not just go, oh, that's good enough? How do you take it and help it to elevate yourself in a way?
Becca sent me something last night, and I find it very interesting when it comes to content and content creation, because there is I spoke at Disrupt a month or a half ago, or maybe 2 months ago, and I talked about you could create like a mediocre law firm right now with just AI. You could do that, a fully AI run law firm, but it's going to be mediocre, really at best. It's going to be, but with same thing with content. You can create content right now, poor content that is all AI. But YouTube just recently, they said that starting July 15th, they're only monetizing content with real human voices, which I thought was, I was like, that's an interesting move, because you've had all of these faceless Facebook channels popping up, making lots of money off of YouTube, and they're shifting that. And I found that to be really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think that, there's a lot to be decided on sort of how does the market respond to this absolute deluge of content, right? So, I mean, I'm struggling with it as a human being. It's just like, okay, how do I pick the pieces out of this that actually, give me some value? So, and then you've got, of course, all the copyright issues that have to be sorted out, and sort of the legal aspects of it, of what are we going to be able to use, and then how to, YouTube is going, hey, I can't pay you X dollars per click for this crap.
Well, it's watering down their brand is what it's doing. I mean, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. I don't know if we'll get into marketing at all, but that's being totally disrupted. The search and paid digital advertising is being totally disrupted by AI. So, any firms out there depending on pay per click, if you can make it pencil at all, are going to have to totally change how they approach that.
Yeah. Well, we can get into that, because it's one of those things where the thing I like about our format is I can go into whatever I want to go into, and we can talk about whatever is interesting. So talk more about that. Why is that?
Why is what exactly?
When it comes to the pay per click, why is it that people are going to have to adapt what they're doing currently? And I guess, how is AI affecting pay per click specifically? Because I know a lot of people rely on pay per click to get a lot of their leads.
Yeah, no, exactly right. I mean, if you're in a PI firm, or any kind of B2C type of firm, that's how you find people these days. Well, I mean, what we see on our side, I mean, we're not experts in marketing for PI firms, but we really think hard about digital channels, is that all the keywords that we care about are completely unaffordable. So we've got all kinds of venture funded competitors who, throw money at that sort of thing and drive those costs up, so that it's like, just an ordinary pay-per-click campaign absolutely does not pay off for us. So we have to go into content and other more cleverer strategies, or it's just too expensive to acquire a customer. So I see that affecting law firms competing the same way. There's just more and more competing for less and less real estate there. Plus, if you've looked at the Google search page, it's like totally crammed with AI and advertisements now. So, I mean, SEO doesn't help you a whole lot in that world. And, is the the person, your potential customer, going to continue to sort through all of that stuff to click and find their law firm, or are they going to go, oh, what's the AI going to tell me here? Which is not giving them the same sort of clear answer they used to have on Google. So I think that's going to be, I think that's going to change a lot. I don't know how, but I don't think we'll have Google the way we have Google today 5 years from now. Maybe not 3 years from now.
No, the search has already plummeted. The volume of search has already started to plummet. What was interesting is that if you go back to the origin of search engines, and the big debate was at the time, and this isn't from me in my experience. I was pretty young at the time. I was in high school, middle school age. But from reading multiple books about this topic, what's really interesting is that the debate was about whether or not to start with a paid model or an advertising model. Mm-hmm. And the debate was if it's an advertising model, we're going to get a lot of garbage. But if we go with the paid model, the adoption is going to be slower, basically. And there's more to it, obviously. Mm-hmm. I do think it's interesting how the LLMs have gone more to the paid model. There's a free option, but if you want the more advanced features, you're going to have to pay for it. So I do think it's interesting, and it makes me wonder if they're going to go more to the advertising model at some point, or if they're going to stick with that paid model. Because if there's no advertising, it really does go back to making sure that you're optimizing your content. So it's no longer SEO. I don't know what the new term is going to be for optimizing your websites for LLMs, but it is interesting how the true focus is going to have to be on making sure that the content is right. It almost like the original origin of what Google wanted it to be, where they want people producing good content. And it seems like the LLMs are going to force that to happen, because you can't just keyword stuff. Right? You just can't put personal injury lawyer over and over and over again on your site. You have to provide actual value on your site. And I think that dynamic, that shift in that is really, really interesting.
I think that is super interesting. And, how do you create a place where people can go to find that good content that isn't just buried in AI garbage? Because that, I find that exhausting. So it's like, okay, maybe, real estate on the internet shouldn't be free. If you have to pay for it, it's going to be better.
By necessity, it'll have to be better.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't love that answer, because I don't want to make this. It shouldn't be about who's got the money, but something's got to move on all of that, because it's whatever we're doing now is definitely not working. And I think my son, who is a software developer, has already turned off his internet. he just completely checked out.
Wow.
Yeah. And it actually it has positive implications for happiness. So there is that part.
Yeah. So I do want to kind of get back. I've enjoyed this conversation thoroughly. Trust me. I do want to get back to lien law, because I want to ask a little bit more about that, because I want to understand kind of how the mechanics work and how you help solve problems. Because you've got firms, they're going, they're billing hours, they got to collect the fees. A lot of them, they're scrambling with cash flow issues. Maybe they've got collections problems. And I wonder, what is it that lien law? How does lien law help that picture for the law firm owner, where it streamlines things? Because we've been talking about content and other things where AI can help you create content pretty quickly, right? It helps you streamline a lot of things. So how is it that lien law helps with that, with streamlining things when it comes to the finances?
Right. Well, kind of the initial pain point that we fixed for people was connecting QuickBooks to their billing. Right. You can use QuickBooks as a legal billing tool, but it's quite painful. And particularly if you have a trust account, it's like a 12-step process to do a trust accounting entry in QuickBooks by itself. And so we automated a lot of that. And we decided, rather than do 200 integrations with everything, we said, let's do one really good one with QuickBooks. And when we started, they were just having the two-way sync. So basically we can keep QuickBooks accurate in real time and in sync with your billing software. So, and that allows us to completely automate a trust transaction. So I can send you your retainer request. You fill that out with your credit card information. That comes back, and the money's deposited in the bank. The transaction is recorded in both in your trust ledger and in the individual client ledger. It's all set for your three-way reconciliation. So that's kind of number one.
By the way, that by itself is pretty incredible. Just that one.
Yeah, and it's pretty complicated. It was not easy to write that, and especially, doing that so that it's a real-time sync. That's a trick. So we've got all of that automation. We similarly automate the invoicing process all the way down to the collection of the payment and the accounting associated with that. So we have a partner called Confido Legal, which is our payments partner. And we like them because they're legal specific and flexible about how they do things. So we can create that tight integration. So, everything from the time entry to the invoice to the sending the invoice to the client with a nice email and a summary of the account, collecting that payment, doing the accounting, all of that can be automated. Then another big pain point that we fix is we have real-time reporting. Because we're connected with QuickBooks the way we are, your books are always in sync. You can always look up your reports and get the data that you need in real time. And so that's a good sample of the types of things that we do.
That's pretty incredible. With the limited time, I want to make sure people know how to reach out to you. So where can people reach out to you for more information about lien law or connecting with you or to see maybe they just have questions for you about tech, or if they want to reach out to you about working with their firm? How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think my email is probably the best. So gary.allen@mylienlaw.com, gary.allen@myleanlaw.com. Thanks, Tyson.
You bet. So I'm going to leave you with a doozy question. So we'll see, and hopefully we're gonna play this back in a few years to see whether you got it right. But where do you see the future of law firm operations heading, and how are you building lien law? And it sounds like all your other things that you got going on, but how are you building those to meet that future?
That's really interesting. I mean, how long have we been saying that, law is going to be disrupted the way manufacturing and tech and other things have been? Decades. I think I'm finally getting convinced that's happening. And it's going to take 5 to 10 years. But, the AI is the thing that is going to force that to happen. Now, there's a lot of other things that need to happen. I mean, we still do trials like we did in the 18th century. You can't have a judicial system that is 200 years behind and have a modern law firm operating within it efficiently. So, there's a whole systemic change that I hope we can accomplish here. I mean, it's when we have a system where 80% of people can't afford a lawyer, something's basically wrong. And that pillar of a free society is wobbling. And so we've got to figure that out. I think AI gives us the opportunity to do a lot in that respect. So, what that system looks like, I don't know. But I think you could see a very different legal system 10 years from now because of that. Lien law wants to be the financial operating system of the law firm within that. We want to integrate with best-in-class technology, Microsoft, QuickBooks, NetDocuments, other top-of-the-line tools, so that the law firm can operate, in a smooth and automated manner within that. That's going to require being very nimble in in the coming days. I mean, and some of the legacy tech companies, well, maybe all of the legacy tech companies are going to have a hard time doing that. The innovator's dilemma applies to law just like it applies to everything else. So I'm excited for the next 10 years. I'm hoping to be sitting on the beach for part of it, at least. But I think that we finally got to the point where we can make law firms more efficient, we can make the system more efficient, and we can make it work better for everybody.
Amen. I think that's a great way of ending it. Thank you, Gary, for your time. Really appreciate this. Like I said, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Anytime I can talk tech with somebody, I like it. So really appreciate your time.
It's awesome. Thank you, Tyson. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I enjoyed the conversation as well. So let's do it again sometime. You can come on my webinar series.
Deal. Let's do it. Anytime you want.
Awesome.
If your law firm is running fine, but you know you're capable of more growth, more freedom, more control, Max Law Con is where you find your next move. This is 2 days of strategy, systems, and straight talk from law firm owners who are actually in the game. No hype, no recycled advice, just the real stuff that's working to grow law firms right now. You're not showing up just for inspiration. You're showing up to make better decisions faster. You're showing up to cut out the guesswork and walk away with a clearer path forward. Because the truth is, trying to figure it out on your own takes longer, costs more, and burns you out. This room, it's where the people serious about building better law firms show up. Get the details and grab your ticket at maxlawcon.com.